Everyone, welcome.
First, you gotta turn it on at the bottom. There's a little button at the bottom.
All right. Now can you hear me okay?
Yeah, there we go.
I can't believe someone can't hear my voice, honestly. I have, that's why when the commandant needed someone to lead the troops, he called me out because I was the only one that they could hear out in front of everyone. Okay, so welcome. We usually don't start with a pledge, but we have a flag here, and it is a day, inauguration day, so why don't we stand and do the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we will start with roll, and we will begin with Mr. Major.
Here.
And Mr. Battisti.
Here.
And Dr. Bush.
Here.
And me. And for the note, we have attending. We've got from the Board of Education, the Vice President of the Board, Mr. McCurd.
Here.
And representing the district, we have the superintendent, Mr. Roberti, and Pauline. Okay. And from Gervin, I'm sorry, not Gervin, but Marvin and Associates. Okay. So, to begin with, are there any questions about where we've gone? Other than, I do have a question that should be brought up during the Board of Education meeting, but it was with reference to something that Dr. Bush brought up before. And it's what our internal auditor is doing, that our claims auditor, not the internal auditor from Marvin, but, and company, but claims auditor. I noticed that we received from Ms. Phelps, I think yesterday or today, November's, treasury report, and she just knocked out the October a few days before that. So Dr. Bush brought up a good question during the last board meeting about the treasury reports and what was happening. You know, are we going to be catching up with, well, now we're only a month behind,
Right.
but we were.
And the statements just come out in the 1st of January, so
Okay.
we're still doing entries in January, so for to have December done, that would be a little
Okay.
over.
So my question is with reference to the internal auditor code during those past things. So how is the internal claims auditor? How is that person functioning? Is that person, are they getting regular payments? Do we just send out automatically a payment, or are they invoicing us each time that he comes and performs the claims audit?
So each time it comes, let's say today is, you approve the board, every Monday or Tuesday, obviously it was Tuesday this time before the claims
Correct.
review, he'll submit a timesheet for the day that he spent.
Okay.
It's only after he's actually here performing the duties.
Okay, so if she doesn't get a report out, how is he?
So the claims audit, so remember, he's doing the actual audit, what we're
Correct.
paying. So that has nothing to do with the prior months. So he's doing January claims right now.
But see, we don't have a report from him showing what he has done. We're in some districts, they do have that. They have a report from the internal claims office.
His claims review?
Yes, the claims review. Now, why, have you not seen that previously?
my prior claims auditor that I had,
Yes.
she would do an audit exception report. So
Exactly, and we
so-
don't do that here.
I had
Okay.
a conversation with him at
Yes,
the last time he was here, not this past time, that he
Right.
needs to start looking at those and presenting those to the board or the audit committee.
so you've already discussed this
Yes,
with
I
him.
did.
Do you need that in writing from, I can put a request through to the board president?
If you want to do that, formalize it, that would be
Well,
great.
it would be just a formalized letter to the board president that she requests to be, getting an exception report, because to be honest with you, I'm not for sure if we're going to be getting our, the treasury report on time. It may be a fluke that they've been caught up now.
She caught up, so that we
Caught up.
Yeah, so but I mean, Dr. Bush, we have had that
Yeah,
issue.
we're caught up now,
Right.
and if you want me to send a letter to Colleen requesting that be done. we can
Okay,
do
no.
that.
It's a completely different issue. We need the internal claims auditor to start this.
That's what she said.
Yep, the audit exception
Okay.
reports, which my prior district used to do.
All right, well, I mean, I haven't seen, they did that over at your prior district, right, Mr. Roberti?
Yeah.
So,
Same process.
and I don't know why they didn't do it here, other than he's a busy man and maybe he can't get it out. That's just a thought,
Can I
okay?
just ask a
All right.
question?
So let's move on. Any other questions?
Well,
starting with you.
The question that I have before she gets going, this, and I think it needs to be cleared up for the audit committee. This is an internal audit financial risk assessment for 2018 fiscal year. Do you want to explain? You weren't here to then, Colleen, so do you want to explain why we're doing this now?
So Deb and I had that conversation, and obviously moving forward, this was very confusing for me. So Deb, I
Maybe we
mean,
have
you're
one
probably
given the
best
microphone.
to explain what Kim's process was.
Yeah, so can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I tend to have a big mouth, so yeah, we were out at the district doing the internal audit in June of 2019. So the way that the previous business manager, Kim, liked to do it is she liked the year to be closed out. She never wanted us to be there when the external auditors were there because it just got chaotic for them. So she would always have us come out right after year end, and we would do the previous year. So that was her preference, and we stayed on track for that for 3 or 4 years. And so, like I said, we went out and we did the work in June of 2019. I think we actually started a little bit earlier, maybe in May, but we wrapped up. And then we were just never able to get her to finalize the report. So the way the reports work is we come in, we do all of our testing, we prepare a report, and then we always give it to the business manager to review first. Our findings will get to you. They're not allowed to tell us we can't communicate anything to you. But sometimes the way that we phrase things as auditors, they know might be confusing for you. So we kind of give them a chance to look it over and say, no, that's confusing, or no, you misunderstood that. And then we kind of can retest and make sure that that's correct. And I don't know if it was the timing of retirement. We just never got to finish this report. So then Colleen came on, and I think she thought we were a year ahead, which we weren't. So then this kind of took a slower priority, I think, as she got up to speed. So we're finalizing it now. We're presenting some information that is not particularly current. I'm not going to, sugarcoat that at all. But Colleen and I are working on a plan to get the next 2 years caught up pretty quickly. And then we would like to start doing them, closer to the actual year end.
So Mike, under that question,
Sorry about that. I didn't catch it.
can I add on to Dr. Bush's question then?
Yes.
So, in other words, would you abide by whatever time frame? Because you were giving us, John, Nellie, and I have sat on this committee for at least 5 years together.
Oh, yeah.
Now, you were giving us all those reports so that we would end out the school year in June. We were getting them in June. And
Yeah, so you guys were getting them in June for the previous year, though.
Okay. That's why, because I always
That
wondered
makes sense.
why.
This report.
You're right, because you're closing out June and July into August.
Mhm.
So my next question would be, what if Colleen was to move her preference when you do your testing.
Mhm.
Because testing's got to be done just prior to submitting your report, okay?
Absolutely.
What if we were to move that so that we had you actually test the year that we're going to be finishing? So right now you have to do, what does she have to do? 19 and 20?
Correct.
20, and then, so if you do 20 and 21, if we were to set up 20 and, how quickly can you do 19 and 20 for us?
I mean, Colleen and I will have to work it out in our schedule, but I agree with you guys. I would like to get caught up as soon as possible.
So the reason I ask is we're getting ready to go into, the finance committee will be presenting to the board. We're getting ready to go into February, and we're going to have our preliminary requests and our preliminary comments on our new budget for the year.
Mhm.
So if we can get this over with, get that under wraps before we begin that process, and that's going to be the third week in February, unless the meeting's moved tonight because of the holiday and week off and everything. But if we could get that done prior to going into our budget season, because it's really going to.
My preference is April, because at least I get my first flush in the budget in.
Okay, so you want to like do submittals, because right now you're doing the interviews with each of the department heads.
Correct.
So you get that, and then you can pound that in.
Right.
So could you right now look at your calendar at maybe March? Let's not wait till April, because that gets down to election time, and we've got a lot of stuff going on in April. Can you, Deb, can you do March?
I certainly can try after March 15th. And so it won't just be me. I usually have at least one other person working with me to get caught up. So I will have to check with our firm administrator to make sure I can get someone. But Colleen and I can certainly work that out tomorrow and then communicate it back to you guys.
Okay, so then that brings up my next question.
Mhm.
Your testing should take no more than 1 week coming in at
Correct.
least, okay? So after that's over, how long before you actually kick a report out to us? What's the
So it has to go through a quality review, a review process. So it usually takes an additional 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay, so you're telling us that we'll probably have a report that you can present to the audit committee in April.
Mhm.
And we will vote on it in the April meeting, correct?
Yeah, I think that could be a feasible timeline as long as everyone can make it work.
Okay, and then March 15th, after March 15th, or April meeting. Now, if we go into that, what if we were to proposal, because it doesn't take a board approval, this is an action that would be coming from the audit committee in recommendation to the budget officer. And that would be that we now receive our report, that we move to the entire board, are you saying August? Could you?
Yeah.
You're closing out June until when, Colleen? End of July,
End of
early August?
Early September.
Yeah.
We have a lot of stuff is due to the state, then, you know that.
Yeah.
Our normal audit.
Correct.
That's why Kim had you come in and do it early. So you
Right.
weren't in the middle of that.
Right. Yeah, it gets overwhelming for the staff to be pulling things for 2 different groups. Sometimes we want to look at the same thing. So that being there at the same time as the external auditors doesn't work great. I mean, we can make anything work that we have to make work, but that tends to not be the most efficient way for the external audit to go or the internal audit to go.
Well,
But yeah, I mean, we don't look at financial information like as a closed out process. So we could start as soon as, Colleen was ready in June, we could do July, because we're not necessarily worried about the balances being closed out. We worry about, were your internal controls followed during the year?
Correct. And not only that, but you look also at our clubs.
Yep.
And so most of those clubs have long met and finished before the end of May, maybe drama club or something.
Right.
So and I have to admit, the bulk of your order is usually with reference to that, other than some operational issues that you bring up. So, yeah, we plan formally on having July. Okay, do you hear what you said, Colleen? Because what club is keeping their money open past May, the end of May? No one.
It really depends on the teachers and staff getting those information.
So we
to
could
us.
send a notice out to them and say, you must have everything reconciled prior to this
And
date,
cash transfer.
especially the ski club. We want all of your receipts in by then, okay? So,
We don't have to-
that's right. This board did away with the ski club. Okay.
Oh.
So,
I've got a kid at ski club tonight, so
okay, well, we have a ski resort right near us, Mount Royal. They would love to have our business, I'm sure.
yeah. Yeah, we have Willard Mountain, so same idea, very close to home.
Absolutely. Okay, so then what if we so we're going to go for that.
Okay.
I'll amend that tonight to Dr. Bush.
You have said several, you've said several months. So you've said March, you've said April, you've said June, you said
Right.
August. So I need, let's put it on the table so we know exactly.
This one here, we don't need the full board to do the one we're doing tonight. The recommendation to move, John, you and I can take a vote on it, and then we can move, and Mr. Major, sorry about that, sir. The four of us could move that we request that you and we'll get it in the formal notes, that you go and do the internal claims audit beginning in June and present it to the board.
Your internal control audit. not the claims
Yes.
audit.
I meant internal control. Did I say internal claims? I'm
Yes,
sorry.
we talked about the claims audit
Although I'm
before. I
still
just wanna
stuck
make
on
sure.
that guy not giving us a
And they're
report.
so close.
All right,
I just wanna
okay,
make sure.
so if you want that contract, we haven't gotten any reports out of him in years, okay? So we'll put that out the bid.
Unfortunately, I can't do both, but
Okay, so, all right, then, so, John, can you make do up the resolution and we'll vote on it?
For the June internal control audit,
Yeah, so that we do the,
I'll make a motion for that. Yes.
and then that the annual closeout will happen. In other words, we close the year out for the internal control audit in our July meeting.
Is that doable?
Is that doable?
Because she's
Yeah.
not testing the financial parts, we have her audit scope for, another sort of testing, it should be fine.
Yeah, because the only financial she's testing are those clubs,
So
okay?
we have 2 periods we have to cover, so.
Okay, she'll move on that one. I'll move on that one during the board meeting for you, okay?
Yep.
And then what we'll do is we'll move, actually, we can move on that here. It's the internal claims motion that I need to move on with her to give you a direction, and then you'll have something formal to give the internal claims auditor.
Sure.
But the four of us can move on the motion for March. You want to do that one, Nellie? So in March, what you're going to do is your motion will be to have the internal control audit.
At the board meeting, when it comes to audit committee, you can say that then.
Well, we'll report on it, that those were actions we taken. We don't need, this is just an action for a directive. We don't need the board for it. The committee can do that. So you, on the other hand, when we do the internal claims, we'll have to do that with a full board because we're getting a formal letter out of the board president to the budget officer in order to have our internal claims auditor start giving us an exception report monthly. Does that sound right, John?
Yes.
Okay, so for you, your motion is that we begin our annual internal controls audit in June and report to close each school year out in our July meeting. Okay? And Colleen can live with that because the only financial she's gonna have to deal with are those clubs.
Mhm.
Okay? And Mr. Roberti can send out a notification requesting all clubs.
Could be taken by that.
Make sure you have everything reconciled prior to the audit that will take place. Does that, Deb, how's that
Yeah.
sound?
Sounds good.
Okay, Dr. Bush, your motion is that we will, in the middle of March, we're given a directive to the budget officer to begin the internal controls audit for 2020.
Correct.
And that audit report will be given to the Board of Education in our April meeting. Okay?
Yeah, what happened to 1819?
That's 1920. He's talking 1820.
It'll be both of them, 1819 and 1920.
Okay?
Mhm.
How's that sound?
Sounds good. I cannot wait to get caught up. It is much easier to do these when they are current.
And then we've already got you, then you can do the billables, invoices into us.
Mhm.
And then we'll go. Okay, so we'll do Nellie's motion first. Is that okay with you, Mr. Manager?
Oh, definitely.
Okay, go ahead. Nellie?
Yeah.
Make your motion.
Now?
Yeah, now, and then we'll vote on it.
Also, I'm making a motion that in March,
Yeah,
the business, Colleen, the business manager, will begin doing internal control audit for 2018-19 and for 2019-20. Given to the Board of Education for approval in March. We'll start it April. We'll start it in March, and we'll have the report in April. Is that doable, Colleen, with you and?
Yep, and once Deb and I get our schedules meshed up, yep.
yeah, that would be fun. Okay, we'll take roll call. Mr. Major,
Yes.
Mr. Battisti,
Yes.
Dr. Bush,
Yes.
okay, what years are those again, Dr. Bush?
Those are 2018-19,
Got it?
2019-20.
Okay. Okay, and then Pinninger, yes. All right. John, do you want to do yours?
They're going to resolve to perform the annual internal claims audit in June.
Control.
Control. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
And that and we'll close the school year out in July of every year.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Major.
Yes.
Oh, any discussion before we take the vote? Any discussion, questions?
I think you can go forward.
I'm sorry about that. You're right. Mr. Major,
Yes.
Mr. Battisti,
Yes.
Dr. Bush.
Yes.
And Curtis, of course, yes. Okay, so any other discussion before we move on? Dr. Bush?
No, so are
Okay.
we ready now to?
John, anything else?
No.
Okay, Mr. Major, did you have any questions on anything that's taken place?
Is the school in arrears so much because of COVID, or is this standard operating procedure?
So, this is not the audit that finds that out. But just in reference to your question, that will be discussed tonight in our board meeting, okay? And I can tell you that we're not in arrears as much as we are we're anticipating monies from the state. We're receiving monies from the federal government, but the state is holding back on items that they've promised to us. So
What
if you,
year? For what year?
so everything that deals with the budget is going to be for 2021, and holdback, we're still waiting for a small portion. They've paid some of 2019 and 2020 school year. So we're waiting, like the pre-K, did they give us complete pre-K money yet? So we're still waiting for that for last year's school year. Yeah, so that's what, when you say arrears, is we're waiting for funding to come through that had already been budgeted and has been set aside that money. So as soon as it comes in, we'll be caught up. But this meeting and these reports are usually, don't we get a copy of this? Did we get a copy mailed to us, emailed to us?
Yes.
I'm sorry, if you knew what today and yesterday have been like, you would forgive me. Okay, did you get a copy of the report that Deb does for us out of Marvin?
Yes, earlier, late last year, when it was done.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And what has happened is at the beginning of this meeting, she explained how the turnover from Kim Brumley to Colleen DiCaprio, it's caused a backup to happen. So
Yeah.
we're doing things in that are a little bit older. The state does not come down on us. Okay. They don't come down on us on this particular audit.
No, they tend to be a lot more forgiving on this audit. Like, you do need to turn them in, you need to get caught up, but it's not like your external audit. They're not going to start withholding funding until you get very much in arrears.
Yeah, and no, we our external audits are always on time and good, but this one here got a little bit messed up because of the changing of the guard.
Yeah.
So that's what tonight's meeting is doing. We're trying to get everything back up to speed, and that's what Dr. Bush's motion was. And then John's changing the way we do, his motion was to change the way we do it. Okay, any other questions?
Well, if the state owes you money, can't you just record that as a receivable and continue to close out?
It's already been, last year's things is recorded as receivable.
Right.
Yep.
In answer to that question, you really can't, but you have to put down,
Right.
you do put it down as a receivable. But still, we have, as far as our actual budget is going, we don't have that money in the bank, okay? So you really theoretically, even though we've paid out, so much, we're gonna have to play a little bit of, well, let's just pray that the state comes through with their budget, okay? All right, Deb, I think let's, for the sake of the time, take your, the report's usually pretty quick, so go right ahead.
Yeah, and I'll keep it even quicker. I know you guys have had a chance to look at it. And if Curtis, if you don't have a copy, just let Colleen or I know, and I can definitely get another one out to you. That's no problem. But this is 2 years old at this point. We should discuss it, but Colleen has done a really nice job of documenting some of the changes that have been made since she's taken over the role. So it does mitigate some of the risks. So I'm going to keep it kind of high level and a little bit quick, but I am totally available if you have any questions. You want to slow me down, you want to stop me, ask questions. So as Curtis was just explaining, actually really rather well for someone on an audit committee, it was it was a great explanation. But our engagement is different from your external audit. So what we aim to do is we look at the risks that are involved in the district financial reporting processes. So we don't so much look at the numbers, the balances and accounts and stuff like that. We say there are certain procedures that are set up within the district to help safeguard assets, controls, checks and balances, that kind of stuff. What are they? And are they actually functioning the way that they're supposed to be functioning? And so that gives us a level, that we feel that things can't slip through the cracks. The way that we do that is we send narratives out to the staff, the business office staff, and we say, how do you do the things you do? They tell us how they do it. Then we come in and we talk to the people and we say, in practice, how does this work? How do you record your cash disbursements? Who signs the checks? Where's the check stock kept? So we sort of vet the information that has been given to us in writing. And then from there, we might even ask for specific examples. We'll say, give us, June and January's bank statements. I want to see that the bank reconciliations were properly authorized, signed off, reviewed. So that's sort of how the process works. We certainly don't look at everything, and we pay not too much attention to balances. So that all being said, I want to say that we actually find the internal control environment at Amsterdam to be quite good. We do several internal audits for many schools. You guys do have a very good internal control process, but these are the things that we've noticed that we think could be improved upon. So, jumping right into things. The biggest expense, obviously, for the district is payroll and related expenses, of which you guys are certainly aware. And the fact that you have different employee groups under different union contracts, there's federal law, state law that has to be abided by. It just makes it a very inherently risky area for all districts. So, some different things that we did, we look at the payroll review process. We make sure that time cards are signed by approvers, stipends are approved and signed. So when we tested that stuff and did our walkthroughs, we didn't find any issues, which is why it's not in the report. We just report on some things we think could be improved. So in the payroll area, the big issue that was happening in 2018 was there wasn't a really good process for making sure that the grant acknowledgements were being signed. So when you get money from federal grants, the people being paid with those monies have to acknowledge that they know that they're being paid with those monies, so that there's no abuse, with that. They're being fully charged to a grant or partially charged, and they acknowledge that. At the time, I believe that.
Quick question. So you are saying that because you do realize that we have a lack of senior personnel in our administrative group, and people that used to be responsible for the grants would watch over that and make sure that happens. Now we've got our curriculum leader.
Right.
Office leads that. So any of the payroll personnel that
Right.
are being paid through for federal funds, we initiate and ask somebody to follow up and send them.
Right.
Yeah, but you're sending that to someone else on the line. Like in this case, they go to Sandy.
No, Sandy doesn't. I give it to Dawn. Dawn was the one that was doing it before. So.
But she's saying it's not happening. That's what she's saying. She's right.
It was not happening in 2018. I think this has subsequently been corrected.
Yep.
And it may have been happening. We just could not, there was no documentation of it happening.
Well, did you, when you did your test, did you do individual tests of like a person that is receiving grant funding for their payroll? Oh, you did?
Yes. Yep, and we didn't find any instances where it wasn't there.
Yeah.
We just also, so it should be something that's done with each payroll. Kim, I'm trying not to speak, about someone who's not here anymore, but her process for payroll was she would pull a couple of employees and sort of make sure that she would do like her own internal test on the payroll to make sure that she liked it. Well, we were suggesting when you pull someone who has federal funding, you should be making sure you have the signed certifications. And that, he said, I do, but it was never documented. So if it's not documented, it didn't happen.
Years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But you wrote that up before. That was a problem before.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of these are repeats.
Not resolved that.
Correct.
Have we resolved it now?
Yes.
We have a process in place.
Because just so you also know, when we have our single audit from our external auditors, we
Right.
also verify those certifications too.
I understand that. I know that.
So there's never, as far as I'm concerned, I just asked about a month ago, send everything out and everybody's returning them. So it's, again, this time during this year, it's kind of hard because everybody's out.
Right.
So we are getting them. We are asking clerical staff to help us assist in getting those back in.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, so I understand that. I think it's all been corrected. So I hope that when we do, the 2020, we'll see that that's the case and that we can take it out of the report. The next area that's pretty major in the district, obviously, is your cash disbursements. You guys were talking about the internal claims auditor. They play a huge role in this. And so the things that we found, the claims auditor was doing a report and signing off on what he was doing. We, we took a sample to make sure that the check signers were appropriate and things were being signed appropriately. We make sure that the check stock is in a locked location. It's not just laying out so that anyone who walks through the office can grab it. A funny story, sorry, as an aside, I was at a district once and I said to them, "Where's your check stock?" And they said, "It's locked in that cabinet." And I said, "Okay, where's the key?" And they said, "It's hanging right there where it says check stock." And I was like, oh no, like defeating the purpose. So anyway, just a little aside. You guys don't have that. They had to like get into a drawer for me. I didn't know where it was.
The supervisor going, no.
Exactly. I was like, oh no, not on a key ring that says checks. Like, no. So, but anyway, so the area in this area, what we found to be the most risky potential issue that could come up was that the district had some credit cards. I don't believe they were in the business office at this point. I think they were in the purchasing officer's office, which they were part-time. It was kind of like wishy-washy. There was a sign in and sign out log to use that credit card or the credit cards. But then no one was ever really checking on the log. The claims auditor would get the bill for the credit card and they would look at the claims. But if I go out and buy a book on Amazon, it doesn't mean it's for the district. So that was our only issue there. Probably nothing was going wrong, but there should have been some better connect between the credit card usage, making sure that they were locked up, all the time properly. And again, I believe in Colleen's corrective action plan, she said that they've sort of tweaked that. So again, I hope in 2020, I get to remove this finding.
So does it look like on your 2018, 2019, you're going to write us up for that again?
So it will probably roll for 2018-19, yes, because
19,
those
20,
probably 19-20 it won't. Yeah, so I imagine 18-19, a lot of the controls are very similar, and it's going to be very hard to get back to what were the controls pre-COVID because everything has changed so drastically. So I think the plan for 18-19 is sort of to use the 17-18 as a guide, roll it forward, assuming the same types of things. And then we'll go in and actually look at these specific areas to see if our assumption was correct that they were the same or if they were different.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so the next area we look at is the cash receipts and bank reconciliation process. Obviously, cash is the best thing to go missing. It's very hard at a school district. Most of your funding comes in electronically. Very, very limited amount comes in via checks and so forth. So, we make sure that the bank reconciliation was prepared by one person, reviewed by another person. That's always a good checks and balances. And we didn't find any instances of that not happening. So the only real issue we saw here just had more to do with the canceled checks. So with your bank statement, you should get copies of canceled checks. And we suggest that the business manager actually just kind of breeze through those and make sure it looks like the checks that were written for the district. The signatures look right. There's nothing weird. There's not a DLS cleaning service that no one knows about, So again, that was something that Kim said was being done, but there was no documentation that it was done. Like there was not a sign off or all looks good. So again, I'm sure it was probably being done, but it needs to be documented for us to say it was. Okay, so then moving on to the cafeteria. You guys are a little bit unique in that you outsource that function mostly. So what we take a look at there is the cash counts. That's one of the areas in the district where cash would have come in 2018. And so we would look at the cash count sheets, make sure that they were double counted by two different cashiers blindly and signed off that it was the right amount that made it to the bank. There was audit reports from your service provider. They would come in and audit. So we took a look at all of that stuff and we found most of the controls to be very, very good. The one issue, again, it's more about documentation, is, you get reports out of your school lunch system, NutriKids, that says we served this many meals, therefore the federal government will reimburse you this amount for those meals served. And what we like to do is have someone review that, maybe compared to last week or compared to last year at that date, or something to kind of say, does it make sense? Is the amount of meals we're claiming, does it seem right? Because we don't want to not ask for everything we're entitled to. And so again, this was just an instance where it was probably being done, but there was, nothing that says, 300 meals today, $2.99 yesterday. So, some sort of thing that we could say like, yes, someone was doing it. So there was just not any documentation. It's a fairly low risk area, but again, just something to note that it could be tightened up a little. So then, as Curtis said, the extra classroom funds, this is not unique to your district at all. This is always the toughest part of the district financial process by far. Students who are in custody of the money, who decide what to do with the money, they have club advisors, so there's like 100 people involved. It gets very messy. So this is not new to you. Overall, I think your controls were quite good, honestly. The signatures on checks by the student treasurers and stuff like that, we're all there in the samples that we tested. So I think overall, you guys have a pretty good group. But there's certain things that we just wanted to mention to make things, again, just a little bit better. If they're going to put on an event like a play, you're sitting there at the door and you're collecting $5. There's nothing to say that whoever's collecting doesn't put $5 in their pocket, $5 in the till, $5 in their pocket, $5 in the till. So one way to sort of prevent that is to sell pre-numbered tickets. So then you get to the end of it and you have 200 tickets sold at $5 each. You can then say, I should have $1,000 to deposit. If you only have 900, there's something to go back on. If you just have someone at a door with a till, what makes it into the bank makes it into the bank, and whatever doesn't. Hopefully everyone's honest and it makes it there, but that's the risk. Similarly, kids have these great ideas. They want to hold these fundraisers. Some of them can be rather pricey. The idea of these clubs and these fundraisers are to teach the kids, financial responsibility, budgeting, and so forth. So really having them evaluate the fundraisers, propose a budget at the beginning, and then do a profit and loss at the end to see how it worked out is pretty key. And we found that there wasn't always evidence of that. And again, with the extra classroom funds, the teachers might have had them in a drawer and we were here in summer and we didn't see them, but they existed. But if we didn't see them, we don't know. So there were, some fundraisers that could have resulted in a deficit and we don't know. One of the big ones is making sure that they're in compliance with sales tax. The clubs are not a part of the district and they are not exempt from sales tax. So making sure they are collecting sales tax on sales when they should be and that's being remitted is fairly important. And then the last thing we wanted to comment on was just the advisors. We've seen instances at districts where, the math club has been open for 10 years, but hasn't been active in 6, but that teacher keeps getting a $2,000 stipend year after year after year. So kind of having someone match up, is that club active and, really doing stuff so that advisor getting paid, is earning the stipend.
So did you find?
We didn't. We didn't, and we don't look at every club. And some clubs don't have financial activity. Like if you get into like a student government or a debate team, they may not have a lot of fundraising and expenses, a check writing. They might be more of a social group. So it's not always something we can look at, but someone within the district, or not that we can't look at, it's not something that's easy for us to determine, but someone in the district, it's usually a list of 30 clubs. Someone could kind of take a look and see what they think.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so that's always the biggest area, but always also the hardest to change. It's a lot of people you have to train and make them understand why it's important. I am always willing to take the blame, tell them that the mean auditor is going to come in and just tear you guys apart if you don't do it right, but that's an aside. All right, so the next area we kind of looked at was information technology. Again, it's not, yeah?
Ask a question.
Okay.
I've asked this question on several occasions to the business office. How do they know that a student activity is being done? And I guess that's being monitored by a timesheet when they have activity. Because I've said, how do you know that they're meeting? And you have said they don't get paid until they submit something for payment.
So you're talking about the club advisors.
Yes.
Okay, so the club advisors, we won't pay them until we get verification from the principal that activity is happening.
Is there a process in place, though?
Because they get the stipend.
Yes.
They get the stipend, but they won't get paid that stipend until we get verified information from the principals that the meetings are being held, that they're doing, those advisors in their building are doing what they're
So
supposed to.
there is a check. There is a check.
Yeah. So-
Is there a process in place, though, that those principals?
Christina, she knows very well that she is not to pay them until she gets verification from the principals that the advisors are doing those clubs.
Yeah, so either that was not occurring in 2018, or at least it was not communicated and shown to us that it was. Unfortunately, I can't turn the clock back, but I'm glad there's now at least something that you can point to and say, like, I mean, the principal is then the monitor. They're making sure that the meetings are happening. So that would satisfy me for our internal control purposes.
And she usually keeps all those emails verifying that, so.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So then the next was information technology. Again, that's not my personal expertise, but we have to know just enough to know enough. And at the time, and I think this has changed drastically, and it has to, it's, constantly changing IT security. But at the time, there wasn't, vulnerability testing being done. There may have been some internally, but a lot of districts are getting a hold of external people to basically try to hack in to see where the loopholes are. So that was something we were saying at the time may have been important. Being a big district, you have a lot of personal identifying information to keep safe.
Colleen, is that being done now? Do you know?
Yeah, so if you see our corrective action plan, because of part of the Ed Law 2D, there's that cybersecurity, which is very expansive. Yeah, and I can't even begin to tell you everything that's involved with that. That's in Eric Scholl, but he provided a lot of the information that they have in process now. So they will be.
That was the question that when Deb was saying that if there's an external test, do we have a third party that tries to attack?
No, he has a software that I think that those tests or those phishing emails to see if people are actually going to react to them. So
yeah, because that's really the second part of this, which is how hackers really get in. Most of the time, they don't sit behind a keyboard and program a way into your system. Most of the time, they send you an email, and I'm sure all of you at this point have gotten them: an email, a text message, a phone call that says your account is locked. Click on this and give me your password. That's how they get in. So I think. And at the time, there wasn't any training being done about those phishing emails, and I think that has drastically changed. I
think I'm kind of referring more to the ransomware thing where they could actually attack, lock up our system and make demands. And that would involve where we would have to have a third party outside. Usually you retain a company that will then turn around and they, however they do it, attack our system. To see if they can get in that way. That's different than what you're talking about. Yeah,
I mean, that's part of it also. And I think now they are doing it internally and maybe using a software that goes outside to try to attack.
You certainly do that, though.
Well, right. And you certainly could consider still getting, a third party to come in and try to do a vulnerability or what do they call it? A penetration test.
It's a pen test. Yeah, penetration test. Yeah.
Yep. So there are companies that do it. We have a couple people on our staff who are certified in that and do that. So, but there's plenty of companies out there.
So also within the last year or two, they installed, John, just so you know, there's a new software that's running that kind of runs behind the scenes. I think it's called Front Endpoint, and I think that's what it's called. So it's one of those software that's installed on everybody's computer that detects any ransomware coming in as well. Yeah, it's pretty extensive. We've invested in that. I think my first year here. So started last
So
year.
has that been tested by somebody from the outside to see if it's picked up?
I can double check with Eric on that.
Yeah, because that's it. It's nice to have it, but if we don't know if it works.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so then sort of similarly, so in the same similar realm, we talk about computer access. For what we care about, it's your Envision software, your financial software. So the issues we kind of found with that is that the year that we tested, there were people who had permissions within the system to work in areas that were not their primary function. So what I mean by that is the payroll clerk may have had the ability to print checks out of, AP. So it doesn't mesh up with what their job function is. It was a result of someone being out on leave, someone doing this, but in those instances when you have to change those permissions, then when the person is back, it should be taken away again. And so that was the comment there. I believe at this point, I think Colleen, when she came in, sort of reassessed all of the controls that were the permissions that were being given to the employees. So I think that's been corrected. And again, I hope in 2020 I can report that. The other thing, and this is something I'm never going to win with districts, but I have to report it, is that in general, the business manager is the person who has the right to change those permissions by employee, add new employees. The issue we have with that, so there's two sides. That person is the most knowledgeable about that software. They know what each of those permissions mean and who they should give it to and why. And so that it's a good person to have that responsibility. At the same time, the business manager is the person who can sign the checks, who can do this, who can do that, who can do everything. So if they can give themselves and take away rights from themselves, it leaves it open to, if that person is fraudulent, they could possibly commit and cover up fraud. So it's unlikely, and there's a lot of other checks and balances. So our recommendation always is to have BOCES or NARIC, something like that, be the person who can actually dole out the permissions, the business manager being, the person to tell them who should have which permissions. It doesn't always work in practice, so I don't envision being able to take this one off your report, but it's also not something I consider very, very high risk, but it's a risk, so we have to report it.
Okay, Jim.
Yeah.
We had before with us, and we did this under the superintendent at that time was Vicki Ramos.
Uh-huh.
She and Kim, we had about a 20-minute discussion on this very issue.
Yep.
And I will let you know that your recommendation was pretty well shut down by business manager and the superintendent, who felt, number one, that it was the recommendation. I think John moved on the proposal. Mm-hmm. What we were doing is we were trying to make it so that the person that our IT person would have those controls because he's independent of the business office. Okay.
Correct.
However, their argument was that he was a lower paid employee that took, and he had other people that were over and more responsible. He didn't understand the like
request.
He did not understand, any of the functions that you would have necessarily in an accounting group, and so they pretty well. It was a long discussion because the parity is not there if you have that business manager responsible for the finances and then responsible for those access.
Right.
So my question to you is so are you writing this up again because of that?
Yes. Yeah. So because it is a weakness. It's an internal control weakness. Our recommendation, because I agree with you, if you give that responsibility to someone who doesn't understand the permissions and what they mean, and then you have someone above them say, they can still manipulate it in whichever way they want. So I totally agree with that argument. Our recommendation is generally to outsource it to like NARIC or BOCES, who does understand the permissions. And so when the business manager asks for something that seems unusual, it pops up in someone's brain like that doesn't make sense.
That recommendation was not given to us when the board moved on that before. Okay.
Okay.
They were it was almost vitriolic, that meeting, because, and it was not just the business manager, it was also the superintendent at the time, you know.
Yeah.
See, the problem is
Right.
taking it personally.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what is it that you're recommending to us now that
So
do?
yeah, I mean, I'm sure you guys do you guys use NARIC
Yes.
at all? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the recommendation is to give them an administrative logon, take Colleen's away, and then Colleen has to ask whenever permissions need to be changed.
Okay, so what happens with NARIC? Do they go and do they keep a log of each time that permissions are requested or not, or? How-
I don't know if they read a log, but they have to go in and physically change it. So if Colleen suddenly said, I don't know what you're trying to steal, Colleen, but something. So if she suddenly, decided to try to add a new code in her paycheck that gave her some extra stipend, they would know, like, well, why?
So are we going to be paying for that service?
You might, and that's why it's entirely up to the district whether or not to implement it. You don't have to act on every one of these, but
You keep writing this up. We as a
Correct.
board need to move, and
Yeah.
we all, we
So-
should keep it that way.
Deb, would
Well, it might be worth just having another discussion.
look at the audit permissions?
Yeah. Great, John. Have a discussion.
Yeah,
John
it's gotta
and
be
Ted, too.
something.
I
Yeah.
agree with John. So if we have another discussion, Colleen can bring up this the NARIC idea, correct?
Mhm.
And
yeah,
then-
I mean, another option, just so that you're aware, but again, it's you have to have someone who's knowledgeable look at it. There are logs about when permissions are changed. So you could leave Colleen as administrator, and at some point you can run a log of, what got changed during the year or whatever. But again, unless someone who understands what those permissions are is looking at it, it's not worth it.
Okay, so
But there are some options.
can we add that tonight? And then that way she won't have it.
Let's move on.
No, I'm asking, can we add that to your meeting tonight? That discussion, the discussion John's brought up, that we go and we.
Well, I was thinking more having it among the superintendent, have Rich, Colleen,
Finance?
whoever wants to be involved with it, have a discussion as to what can be done, because there may be other options we're not even thinking
Right.
about.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that might be a good plan to kind of do, what are our options?
It's
Kind
ready
of
to
flesh
be,
that out.
presented to a board for anything.
Yep.
All right, so, yeah, we've got to find it so that we can move on because of timing. Can we, a matter of fact, we only have like 3 minutes.
That's
But
okay.
Can we
Yep.
go ahead and, we'll make a move on that, can you put that to your agenda
For finance.
for the next finance
Yeah,
committee?
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, why don't you're going to be presenting to the full board, complete? Yes or no?
Colleen didn't have me doing that. She had you guys accepting and then recommending.
We don't
Usually
need
just
it.
the audit.
Yeah.
We'll move on, we'll make a motion. Is there
Excellent.
anything else that's glowing?
So, okay, the rest of the stuff, the fixed assets, you guys hadn't had an inventory in ages, but that, again, has been done since. So that's sort of a moot point. The compensated absence calculation and, some of the census data going out to the actuary, that being double checked, I think also has been, gotten better in 2020. So hopefully we can either remove that or lessen that comment. But other than that, kind of the things towards the end of my report were more looking forward. So there was, the uniform guidance had just come out, and the district didn't have a formal written procurement policy, which was required as part of that. So that was sort of a major finding. But again, I think it's been rectified since. It had to have been. And then, just commenting on the fact that you guys had your OSC audit. They said you have too much fund balance, but then it kept going up rather than the other way. And I know that you guys have now formalized a plan to work on that. So again, I think that'll be coming out, or at least become less severe. And that's all I really had. The last one had to do with a lease standard that was supposed to be coming out, but now has been delayed until even next year. So We don't have to worry about it.
And I didn't find it. Okay.
Okay,
So I didn't
Yeah.
know. Okay.
can you go offline with her on that so that we're up to date?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's not required yet, but Colleen and I can discuss it and figure out what you guys need to do to get ready for it.
All right, Ms. Smith, all I can
Yeah.
say is round of applause for you.
Thank you. No, I'm glad you guys are so engaged and you read the report and you care and you want to know how to change things. It's really nice. And I think a lot of the stuff has been resolved. So I can't wait to get caught up and just have this thing be current.
Excellent. Well, that will happen in March and April, and we look
That's
forward.
good. Thank you all for having me. Have a great night.
Good night.
If anyone has questions, they can reach out to me. So feel
Okay.
free.
Someone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Motion that we close our meeting?
Why not?
Okay.
I make a motion, we close the auditing committee meeting.
All those in favor?
We're going out of this meeting.
Yeah, and then I'll come in on the other one.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
everyone.